Welcome, everyone. So we will be spending the next few hours talking about the FDA's Bioresearch Monitoring Program, specifically the Compliance Program Guidance Manual 7348.810. How many of you are aware of the FDA's Compliance Program Guidance Manuals? Can you give me a green check if so, please? Okay, so some of you are aware. So we're going to have a guided walkthrough of this document. So we had an update to this document in April of 2017 to reflect the changes that we saw in the final rule for FDA under 42 CFR 11, which is the requirement for registering our studies and results on clinicaltrials.gov. So this was updated to reflect those requirements to make sure sponsors are doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. We often forget that 42 CFR Part 11 is part of good clinical practice. If we have those applicable studies, they need to be registered. So what we'll focus on right now are how regulatory requirements are being incorporated into inspections. If the FDA is focusing on specific things, we'll see it reflected, certainly in what their findings are. We'll look at the Compliance Program Guidance Manual and the rules that support changes in inspection focus, which we talked a little bit about it. Assess the FDA's application of the inspection manual contents as reflected in regulatory communications. So what the FDA is actually looking for and how they convey that to sponsors and CROs. We'll look at steps for preparation for an inspection. We always want to be audit ready, but we certainly want to be inspection ready. And I always say that these compliance program guidance manuals are really the test question answers. The FDA tells you when we come in, we're going to be looking for these things. And you'll see buried in this about 18 or so SOPs that the FDA expects to see when they come in and do these types of inspections. Now, many of us do have standard operating procedures within our organization. It is not yet a regulatory requirement, but certainly the FDA looks at the development and the implementation and the use of standard operating procedures as one key tool for remediation, for bringing ourselves back into compliance. And we have seen that reflected repeatedly, not just in sponsor warning letters, but in investigator warning letters as well, another entity that's not required at present under regulations to have those standard operating procedures. So this is the FDA's Compliance Program Guidance Manual that we will be focusing on for this course. 7348.810, as I mentioned, updated in April of 2017. It's really the FDA's SOP on how they come out and do these types of inspections. So if we think about the changes that we have seen in GCP over the last several years, we've been pulling down a lot of information from manufacturing into good quality management. And we saw ICH E6 was updated in November of 2016 to reflect this requirement. How many of you are familiar with that update under ICH E6? Okay, all right, great, because we still have some folks that don't really appreciate that. So what we want to make sure is that we are looking at information, we understand that information, and we're incorporating that information into our processes and our subsystems and systems. So the FDA is going to be looking at things like from a manufacturing perspective, we can think of quality systems. What is it that sponsors are supposed to do? What is the primary role of a sponsor? So what do you think a primary role of a sponsor is? You can go ahead and type that in the chat panel if you'd like. Oversight, okay. Oversight of the study, right, ensuring compliance, the protocol from the individuals that they select and work with, absolutely. And we know that the greatest risk to a sponsor is not being able to ensure that they have appropriately captured the documentation that supports safety and efficacy of their product, right, that supports their endpoints. And this comes down to people. It comes down to documentation. We have to think about what quality systems have to be in place for us to meet our requirements. And within each of these subsystems, if you will, so if we think of quality is making sure that that study is being conducted appropriately, right, that we have a clear, detailed, well-written protocol, those sort of things, making sure we selected proper investigators and monitors, that we're monitoring appropriately, that we're assuring compliance, that we have oversight of all of our vendors, including our investigators, so that we can prove that our product is safe and effective, right? Whatever those endpoints might be. Those tasks are distributed in quality subsystems. So who are the people you're working with? How do you document? How does data flow? How do you select your vendors? How do you oversee them? What do you do when you monitor? How do you handle your data? How do you handle that investigational product? So each of these is a quality subsystem. And then within each of these subsystems are processes that have to function. So we'll walk through this. What is the FDA looking for when they're looking at these different quality subsystems? How do we know that we're going to meet those goals? So FDA reminds its staff, reminds us, that the purpose of bioresearch monitoring programs, or BIMO programs, are to ensure that the right safety and welfare of subjects have been protected, that we have followed FDA regulatory requirements, that we can rely on the data that's submitted to the FDA to support that marketing application, to ensure that we have been compliant with FDA regulations, and a reminder that these are meant as tools, SOPs, for how the FDA will go about assessing sponsors and CROs.